Hello and welcome back to the Light Club. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. And it's an absolute delight to be welcomed tonight by Mali Davies. Hello, Mali. How are you doing?
Hello, everyone. Hello, Kim. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm really, really good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, well, I'm recovering from man flu, so I'm there. I'm here tonight. If it was yesterday, a bit different, but yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's much appreciated. And before we get all your lovely images up and we can kind of discuss them one by one, and you can give people any hints or tips that you may have, can you kind of let us know really what kind of got you into photography and what sort of things do you enjoy photographing?
This question, it shouldn't change really. It should be the same answer all the time. But um, looking back, what got me into photography was probably my granddad and art and being a painter. My granddad was a painter, and I wanted to go down that road and was a fine artist and growing up, college and all that. But the camera was the one constant. I always say this from about 6, I had it's the usual story, everyone said, when I was born, I had a camera fitted in me. I've always been into photography, but didn't realize it was the one thing, the one that I wanted to do more than anything else. And I went down many roads doing fine art. I wanted to be a you know, a crazy kind of abstract impressionist painter for quite some time. I did 4 years at art college, creating huge paintings, Jackson Pollock style, Jean Miro, that kind of Wallace Kandinsky. Those artists were big influences on me, and I actually think now, as I've got more invested in photography, that they have influenced where I am today and influenced how I see a little, maybe. And that's it, really. I've always loved photography. It's been the one constant, and I possibly should have gone more into that at a younger age. And then I went and did graphic design because you've got to feed yourself. You've got to make some money, haven't you? You've got to make your way in the world. And for some reason, I didn't think I could do that with photography. I was so blinded by fine art and painting and just and the camera was with me, and I went through many cameras from Pentax right to where I am now shooting Nikon. Nikon has been I know we say it's not the camera, it's not the system, but there was something very romantic that attracted me to that system. And from being a kid watching Superman, when the reporter has his camera and it's a Nikon, and I think it was an FE or whatever. I never had the opportunity to shoot film with a Nikon. It was a Praktica when I shot film at college, and then a Pentax, and then I went through various iterations of Pentax up to where I am now shooting with a Z7. So there you
Brilliant.
go. A short
Yeah.
answer.
No, it's fantastic. I love hearing how people have got into photography because everyone's story is a little bit different. And it's very clear that creativity and all different artistic genres clearly run through you, which is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
And you do a lot of, outdoor nature photography, don't you?
Yeah, predominantly landscape photography, but of late, um, so to go back to where I came from, when you say how did I get into photography, I used to do street photography around Salford, and back in the day of Manchester, when it was the rave scenes, early 90s. And I keep saying I'm going to dig out some of those negatives, but I was a bit rubbish back then. I just loved having a camera and shooting Ilford and 400 and getting out and, paving stones, unusual buildings, people. And me, I'd go through film like there was no tomorrow. My mum and dad just, it must have cost him a fortune, because obviously they fronted the cost when I was younger. Then when I got to college, I had to front it myself. So that stopped quite quickly and went on to other things, having a drink and getting out, socializing at university. And yeah, I guess landscape photography came along in 2010, 11, 12. But the fine art side of things, and not just the impressionist work. I was painting landscapes. My granddad predominantly did landscapes, and I think that jumped into my soul. So that was there as a learner in composition, in, you know, working out scenes and how to put things together in paint. Is it puts you in good stead for the camera, because you're thinking compositionally as you're building up a painting, and that's where I am now. But I am going to be going on the streets a bit more. I went away. I was very fortunate to go on a cruise with my family, and we went all around Europe, and Lisbon was just a wonderful experience, and it kind of jumped into my soul. And from there on, I'm like thinking now, do I create another YouTube channel, Kim? Do I mix it up with landscape? I've got some friends saying I should keep it all on one channel, but I'm thinking I could do something a bit madcap and create a street photography channel. I'd like to do every city in the country. That would be great, wouldn't it?
That's a really good project idea, that. I love that idea. Brilliant. It's really interesting, actually. I love the journey. And I think when a photographer kind of goes in and out of different journeys, like I go from landscape to more abstract to now I'm getting really into macro photography, and I dabble in a bit of astro. But it's good to have these different interests because it keeps things fresh for you and gives new perspectives and places to go to. But I think one thing that's really clear in your imagery is you can just tell that you come from a very artistic, creative background. Your images have a very like artistic kind of spin on them, and it'd be really good now actually to get your first image up so we can start to showcase some of these, because you can really see where the almost impressionism fine art style has come from. And when you look at a lot of your images, they do look, some of them look like, you know, impressionist paintings in many ways, and you can just tell that your background hasn't always been in photography, but you've dabbled in other things. So I'd love to hear the kind of story behind this image and how you photographed it, and how you created this scene and why.
This is Crosby, as it says down below. By the way, that was a very smooth cut to get into the image, Kim. I like that. I was like, wow, I'm impressed. You've done this before. Yeah. I love Crosby, and I love Formby and around that area, and it's a place I like to go and wander, not always make a video. So as yourself, I think, I don't know, whenever I go out, I feel compelled that I have to combine a video with the photography. It's almost like an addiction, really. But on this occasion, we're over at Crosby, and I went for quite a long walk. I almost got to Formby, which, if anyone knows this area, it's about a 4 or 5 mile coastal pathway that runs all the way down to Waynesdale, actually. And I just started vlogging, and I give up. I just put that to one side and just went for a walk, which is very unusual for me. And this was handheld. Looking out towards Blackpool is just over to your right, cutting off. So I got this minimal and almost nothing. I love the idea of filling the frame with very little, and I also love the idea of chaos, as you will see further on in possibly a couple of my other images. But at this point, I could say I was feeling a little bit sad. I think it's important that the way we feel is reflected in the images. This place has fond memories as a child, and being with family and my mum and the dog and wandering down here. So there was the spirits of the past, if you like. There was the voices and the laughter, but it was grumpy. It was a really wet day. I was soaked to the bone here, and I shot this. So just to give the listeners a bit of insight into this image, before I get into promoting the fact that this is the front cover of my photo book, Anne Stapper. Look at that, smooth, that, wasn't it? So Anne Stapper, the photo book, and this image, they all combine through emotion, and they connect through emotion, as I've just explained about the walk here and how I was feeling on the day. And the book is about that. I say a book, it's more like a zine, a collection of images over the past 2 years, and we know what's gone on in them 2 years. I'm not going to mention the fact of what we went through, but it definitely had an effect on all of us in the way, especially photographers, I feel, because we're wanderers. Naturally, we're wanderers. We want to go out, we want to get to places, and discover. And when that was took away, Crosby, in one of those fleeting moments of freedom, was a good place to clear your head and take stock. So just to give some tips on this, there was no grads used in this, and I have stopped using grads due to using the Z7 because of the dynamic range. Now, some people might say, what do you mean by that? Well, when you shoot with that kind of camera, or let's face it, anything from 5 years ago to present day has great ISO, has great dynamic range. Most cameras these days will give you that range within your raw file, so you can bring back highlights, you can play with shadows, you can move detail around within an image. And it was a handheld long exposure, which is ridiculous to think. To get the sand was blowing. Now there's not a lot of movement. There's not a lot of movement in the clouds, but it's just enough. And then in post-production, I did drop a grad down just to bring that sky in at the top a little bit more and give it a bit of weight. But I didn't really edit this all too much. Possibly a little bit of Photoshop work on the sand, and it's not perfectly sharp. And this is a learning process for me. Even now, after all this time, we spend so long chasing sharpness and chasing to get our images a certain preconceived idea that I think that we're all past. We need to do this, we need to do this, need to do this. And the marker is soft, but because of the style of the image, I feel that really works, and it lends to that image. It almost looks like it's vibrating at the top of it. And again, the idea of alone is it's us photographers out there alone. But it's good to get out, it's good to breathe the air, it's good to be in the landscape, and it's good to clear your head. And this is a place I do enjoy to visit for those reasons.
Brilliant. I absolutely love your mindset and how you've gone about creating this image, because you really get that solace alone feel with it, and the colors and how you photographed it. And I love like the mindset you have there of things not being 100% sharp, because there's definitely an introduction, I think, now into people being more open-minded to more creative styles of photography and kind of breaking the rules, so to speak. And it really does help with that emotion. I love it when I hear a photographer speak about emotion, and I'm so glad that you're one of the photographers that really taps into that, because your images just mean so much more when you're thinking about how you're feeling in that moment when you're taking the image, and everything just seems to come together so much easier when you're tapped into that. So brilliant. I'm excited to hear what your story is behind the next image.
Right. Well,
Yes, it's different, very different.
Well, lots of people who know me personally and even locally have said, oh, they've seen me wandering off down the path where I live. This is about 1.5 miles away. Also featured in Anstapper. If you want to get your hands on, go to maliphotography.co.uk. That's it. I won't do it again. But this is called Crank Hill, which is kind of fitting for me. It's a bit of a crank. So again, this is a place I like to go after work because I am full-time employed. I'm not a full-time photographer. I am an amateur photographer, stroke semi-professional, maybe. I put a lot of time and effort into my photography. I live and breathe it. And this particular image, they're called the camel trees. From different perspectives of this area where you stand, they form together to make the humps of a camel, and it does look like a camel from a distance. And this was a sunset. Yeah, if you can call it a sunset, it was again bit of a wet day. So it's important to realize about my photography and what I do, that I go out and nothing else matters, that I'm not waiting for conditions. We are given what we're given, and I will look and see and think, well, what can I do? How can I embrace what is around me and what's happening? And I just quite liked the idea of the swirling, whirling skies that were in front of me, and I've enhanced them with just using brushes, masks, filters, very gentle, not a lot of, again, pushing the sliders around too much, a lot of local touches, a lot of just using the brush tool in Lightroom to enhance certain areas and to bring out shadows or light and dark and dodge burn like you would do in a photo studio on an enlarger using a block, and cut out bits of paper, one elephant, two elephant, giving it all that, you know. Well, it's the same principle in Lightroom for me. I like to play around with editing quite a lot, and it forms my style, I think. And these trees are very personal to me, because thousands of images of them, and I think that's important as well to anyone listening. Although you probably already know, if you're photographers listening, I don't know how many it is. There's only 3 of us. I think we've got 1 listener, Kim. So that 1 listener, repeat, go to a place you love and repeat, 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 and you'll find something every day, every time you go there. And that's what these trees are to me. They are. They give me a chance to push myself, test myself, and not get bored with the same place, and reach for something that I find aesthetically pleasing, and hopefully that passes on to other people. And so far seems to be doing okay.
I love that, because other people are so like determined to travel the world and go to different places. And it's nice when you meet a photographer who's very deeply connected with their local area, because it's accessible to you all the time. And as you say, when you repeatedly go back to somewhere, it's amazing what new images you can create. And it's amazing how the different weather, the different moods, the different lights, how it just completely transforms the landscape and that location. And it's building that deeper relationship to it. And yeah, the clouds in this image are fantastic. And again, it's a very emotive image in many ways, which is really, really beautiful. So
Oh,
yeah,
thank you.
I
Thank
love
you.
it. Your next image is this one here, which, oh, lovely tranquil photograph. It'd be great, I think, to speak about how you use filters particularly to create this effect.
This is going back a long way. I think this image is possibly 3.5 years old. When I say a long way, in terms of, so let me just explain why I've just said that. I don't know about yourself, Kim, but I see a lot of my work in terms of YouTube years,
Mm.
because the memories are in video and they're sealed. So anything I lie about this image now, if you go back and watch the video, you can go, "Oh, you said this." Well, I have got an excuse. I've got a really bad memory, and I'm 50 this year, so there's my excuse. But this image is about 3.5 years old, and it's of Plover Scar Lighthouse, and I was with my good friend Mikey Swales, who I go out with quite a bit. I think this might have, no, this wasn't a meetup. I used to run Mali meetups, and we'd gang of us would get together and share the day in photography. And this image, I'm not sure what I explained on this actually, because I think now, remembering back, it could have possibly been a reverse grad. Yeah, I've put medium grad, but if I think now, I also used a reverse grad on this. So it was a 10-stop ND. And it was a moment, just a real moment, because the tide comes in quite quick here, but it stays quite low for a long time. So it's like a foot, 2 foot of water that just drifts in. So you get this beautiful flatness with an ND, and you can really go for the minimalist look. And it just always reminds me of a spaceship or a rocket or something. And I
Mm.
called it Blast Off. There's hints. So I shoot in RAW, so I enhance the color slightly, but it really was like this on the day. I remember that sky vividly. It didn't last long. It was probably about a minute. It went off and then just faded away. So if you go and watch the video, I think it's called Search for Blast Off Mali Photography on YouTube, and you'll see the madcap moments in it, because it was a bonkers moment where we were there quite early, and I'm not good with the sea and tides. So getting this shot, I am quite a way back, and I think I might have even shot it on a 70 to 200. I can't remember exactly the EXIF data. It is quite an old image, but I put this in to show, because I've always used NiSi. I've been through many iterations of filters, and I use a lot of different filters these days. I use different brands because I think it's horses for courses. But the long exposure kit that I have from NiSi, which did consist of a 6-stop and a 10-stop, I now have a 15, and I may as well call it welding glass, a 20-stop filter. It's bonkers. And I've got quite a few projects going on in the background for long exposure photography, and I can see me releasing quite a bit in the future. I've already shot one for Formby, another one with the NiSi kit, and I've got a couple of other places in mind, but I'm not telling you yet. So this one was a 10-stop, and if it could have been around 2 minutes, 3 minutes, this, to get that sky moving the way it did.
Yeah, beautiful light here. Those clouds, particularly, just like you
Yeah.
say, the colors just make this image pop. I'm guessing, well, I'm sure everybody listening to this is going to be really excited to see what you come up with in the future with these 15 stops and 20-stop filters. It's
I hope so.
amazing how long you can create an exposure, and it's actually quite a challenge. I've tried it a few times,
Yes.
and it is a really challenging form of photography when you're dealing with that long an exposure. So yeah, I'm excited actually to see what you come up with in that project.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah.
And your next image here is this one here, another similar effect, but
Yeah.
the colors are stunning.
Early morning at this was at Kirby Marina. Lots of photographers in the northwest area know this place, and I put this image in again. It's quite an old image, but I wanted to showcase tonight, as we're talking on the NiSi channel, just how optically good the NiSi filters are and color rendition. This has not been tampered with. The colors haven't been added or changed. There was no, maybe vibrancy was added, but not a great deal of saturation. I think it's very important that you balance color and that you treat color. It can look attractive. I think if I'd have pushed this another 5% or more, it would have. It's all opinion, isn't it? But I think subtly, there's enough color there to pop. And also, I've not changed the sky. I've not changed the clouds, so they are a little bit messy. Actually, they're natural. But they're leading in from the corners, and I like that. I like everything's leading in from the corners. The smoothing of the water on the marina, it's not the sea, it's actually an enclosure of water that marries up to the River Dee. And this weekend, actually, we're getting a 9.9 meter tide. I probably shouldn't tell you that. Don't go. I'm going. Don't know. Just don't go. Did I say it? No, you didn't hear that. Anyway, this was shot on the marina, not when the tide was in. And I have removed, there's like a boardwalk, there's like a pathway on the horizon, and that's it. And then in the background, you have the start of the Welsh Mountains and Flintshire, that area. And I have took that away, and it wasn't a multiple exposure. This was just one shot with just taking the horizon away in a technique I use using motion blur and using Gaussian blur. And very simple to do. And it's something I've not done, actually, is tutorials on my channel. And I often think, should I spend some time behind the computer recording? And now I've seen tonight with StreamYard, oh, you're going to be terrorized. I'm going to be popping up every day now doing live streams.
Oh gosh, and how are you going to find the time to do all of that?
Oh, no, wait, there's always a way. There's always a way, Kim.
Amazing, amazing. Those people, like I can totally agree there with the color kind of rendition and definition of the NiSi filters. I was out for sunrise this morning, and
Oh,
the color was so brief. It was just a slight purpleness, and then using the polarizer as well to bring out some of the colors in the water and some of the clouds.
yeah,
It lasted like 5 minutes, but when I got home and I looked at them on the computer, like you said, I didn't have to do much editing at all with the color. The vibrancy and the
yeah,
color was just there. It was just beautiful.
yeah.
And it's amazing how they can create that. So yeah, it's definitely
That's a
brilliant.
good point, Kim, with the polarizer. And I did use the landscape CPL on this.
Mm.
But
Yeah, it's great.
not switched on. It's just on the bottom. When you turn it, a lot of people, you got to be careful of the direction of the sun because you can get dark shadows coming in on the corners. Does that with all CPLs do that, and you can control that just by switching it on and off. Well, in this case, it was just on, so we're
Mm.
not seeing into the water, but it does give those colors a pop.
Brilliant. It's good to mention that actually to play around with that and not always
Yeah.
have it on full polarization. So yeah, fantastic tip there. Brilliant. Your next image, we're back to
Oh,
the trees here, but a very
yeah.
different one, a nice black and white shot this time.
At the same place as the crank camel trees. Fastest vlogger in the West was the name of the video on YouTube, and I just titled it that because it is local to me and getting out, and we're in full harvest mode. The fields are full of wheat, and the colours on one side and the other is actually what they were green heads on one side and they were all brown and ready to be harvested on the other. And there is a little bit of trickery here. I'll explain some more about that as I talk about this image, but I don't think I overdid this with stops. Or yeah, it was a 6-stop and it was on the old V6. I actually really like that filter system, the holder. It had some quirks, but I did like using it. It just, I'm not one for the locking nuts, and there's quite a few filter systems out there, not just NiSi now, that are putting bells and whistles and all kinds on these systems. And I like the fact that NiSi have always kept it simple. Hook on, done, psh, down. You put your filter in, and away you go. And the 6-stop here just gave me that bit of movement in the wheat and then the sky, but not all done with a filter. Some of the sky was done in post production, and this one single tree in front of us, there are 2 other trees. You've just seen them before. The camel trees, they sit behind this image at the top. So there's a bit of Photoshop work where I've removed those because I didn't want distracting elements. And it's my image. I feel I can do what I like with an image within reason. Again, I haven't changed the sky out. I haven't done anything overly, you know, swapping things, shall we say. And there wasn't a lot of processing, but the top of the sky, I've introduced a little bit of motion blur in Photoshop, and I've painted that in using the history brush. So here's a quick tip for you. If you switch out and go edit in Photoshop from Lightroom, after you've done a decent edit in Lightroom, I then open this up, 2 layers, duplicate the layer. The top layer, I went with a motion blur in the filters and played around with how much blur. So the whole image was blurred out then with the motion blur, and using a direction of around 45 degrees, as you can see in the clouds there. So I'm mirroring the clouds. I'm switching between on and off to see the original layer and the Photoshop motion blur layer, switching on and off to see. And then I get I just simply get the eraser brush, make it as big as I can within reason, and then I lower the opacity or the I can't remember the name of it in Photoshop now, but the weight of the eraser brush, and I just paint out the motion blur, and I end up leaving just little parts of this. To not everyone gets that live, do they? Sorry, everyone. I just got myself. I am a bit dry. I've had man flu. Did I say? Anyway, the painting out the layer, painting out the motion blur layer. and just leaving subtle top corner, little bit on the left, little bit on the right, but everything on the horizon then is the original. And I just think it adds that little bit of texture, adds that little bit of interest, gives it that feel that I personally like to play with. And I don't do this a lot with my images, but on this occasion, I had a lot of fun doing it, and that's what it's about, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it's all about fun, and it's about kind of creating images and interpreting things as you would like to as a photographer. And it's great to know, I think, as an individual photographer, when to do very little editing and when to go a little bit further to create something more artistic and creative. So thank you so much for going into detail there. I'm sure there's a number of people that will have found that process really interesting to listen to. So brilliant. Your next image, this one here, very minimal and another black and white, but with not much darkness to it.
Yeah, I like to do that. I like to lift shadows. But it's not flat, is it? I think, again, to get this effect, we're using light and shadows in Lightroom, but also in your exposure. I think we all we try to keep the histogram even in a raw file, so when we get back we can edit and do more with it. But on a lot of occasions I like to do it in camera and push the exposure, so this was quite overexposed even as a long exposure. So there was 3 or 4 shots taken here, and there is a color version of this which a lot of people liked, but personally I like the grayscale. I like the black and white mono effect of this. I feel it's more still. There's more mood. There's more emotion in it. The color becomes a little bit happy, a little bit jolly for minimalism, and just not quite has that effect that this shot. And this is quite an old shot. I'd also like to say this is from one of my most successful videos I've ever made on YouTube, and I don't know why. And I had a cold as well. Maybe I need to go out and have a man flu every time.
Maybe. Sometimes we never know, do we? Sometimes the
No,
odd video like takes off and there's no reason why.
no reason. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I've got a fondness for this. I love this image. It was a 10 stop. The tide's coming in. When the tide comes in, it reveals these islands, these islets, and these channels. And it was just fortunate to be stood in the right place at the right time when it was happening. And there was a lot of detail in the sky. I could have put more detail in, but what I wanted to do was just show this to be a minimalist long exposure and add in very subtle touches. Again, I like to use brush masks in Lightroom and use the exposure values to paint in just softness, paint in darkness and light. Didn't do a lot with this, to be fair. This is pretty much out of camera.
Brilliant. It's interesting to see the contrast there between this one and your last one, and how you've kind of gone about creating it, and how you've not really done much to this image. And it really has that feel to it, that very minimal image, but a nice calming effect, which is really, really beautiful. And it's nice to know why photographers choose whether to keep an image in black and white, or sorry, in color, or switch it to black and white. Because there's always different reasons for it. So it's interesting to hear in this case why you chose the black and white version. Yeah.
Thank you.
Your next image is this one here. Very different, this one. I'd love to hear the story behind this one.
This is the sunken trees of Thirlmere, and there is quite a story to this, so hold on. I'll try and be as quick as I can. I'm looking at the clock and I'm thinking, don't go on too much, but I could talk a lot about this image because this comes in the freedom time when we was allowed out, and I'd had this idea in my head for quite some time. It's not very often I get pre-visualized ideas, but me and my friend, we'd been to Thirlmere, and it was flooded quite high, the waters, and I'd noticed that the birch were underwater, but it just wasn't quite right. It was a blue sky day, and we went back again and so that was probably a year prior, before the world changed. And then we in the freedom time, I went back again, and I'd had this idea of there's a sunken village in Thirlmere as well. So Thirlmere has quite a, yeah, it's, I can't think of the word. It feels spooky. Thirlmere in the Lake District, it's quite remote. It's quite cut off. It's not commercial, and the area itself just screams of the past, the voices of the past, and these sunken trees, the birch, and I'd been watching Adam Gibbs, and he'd done a video in, I can't remember the name of the place now, where he had all these aspens sunken. I think Gavin Hardcastle, yes, Gavin Hardcastle went back and copied Adam Gibbs. And he went and did the shot with the sunken aspens as well. And I thought, wow, that reminds me of Thirlmere, but almost the opposite, because their images are very aqua blue, very bright, very beautiful, you know, really kind of like, you know, just full of happiness and just tranquility. Whereas Thirlmere was like the dark side, like quite foreboding and almost, like I say, spooky. There's a real harrowing feel about parts of that area, I feel. And I got this idea to go and shoot these, and they didn't quite come out right. And this is the wonderful thing about photography, is sometimes you can preconceive ideas, you go out and it can ruin everything. But I carried on shooting, and I just gave up on what I was trying to do. I was trying to do an Adam Gibbs or a Gavin Hardcastle, and I needed to do a Mali Davies. And once I realised this is what I need to do, and at the time I tripod in many places, and I just saw these and the light and the colours as well. So again, the edits on this was just a lot of layering. When I say layering in Lightroom, I like to use grads and alter, put a full grad from top to bottom, digital grad, not a NiSi grad, sorry, and then remove areas. So add clarity, or add shadows, remove highlights, and paint areas in and out. Add another grad, put some more exposure values in, change the maybe the color in, maybe have some you know, just changing the way the white balance is affected, and then painting areas of that out, leaving it behind. And this building of layering using mass is how I got this image to eventually look. It is messy, it is chaotic, but I love this image because of those emotions and the little battle going on between the group, and then the two that are the thinnest are the strongest, and all the big trunks that are together should be the strongest, but they look quite, there's a story going on between each tree. They look quite frightened of each other, and there's almost an argument. There's a gang against these two, but these two thinner birch are like, no, we're not having this. And that's what goes on in my mind when I'm in the woodland. I see conversation amongst the trees, and how they're interacting with each other through weight, shape, form, contrast, depth, and there you go. That's why I stuck to this image, because it could have just been tossed to one side, but I saw beauty in it and aesthetics again.
Beautiful. That's got to be one of the most beautiful image descriptions I've ever heard. I love that, how you've got these like characters of the trees, and you know, when I saw this image, there's an emotion attached to this, and it is almost like that spookiness, that forebodingness that you said. You can almost imagine like a witch or something coming out the back right of the image and creeping through, and just the color you've kind of got going through this image, and how you've captured it in a square crop as well. There's definitely something about it, and a fantastic lesson there that you learned going out and, yes, finding inspiration from other photographers, but the moment you try and copy other photographers, like something didn't sit with you, and then the moment you just think, okay, I'm getting inspiration from these photographers, but I'm going to embrace me and my style, look what you've created. And it's fantastic. So when we try and copy other people, it's not us. You know, we've got to be true to ourselves
Yes.
as creatives, as photographers. And if we stick to that and do what we want to kind of feel drawn to do, then our images mean so much more to us, and they end up looking and feeling more to other people as well, because they can feel how much emotion and thought has gone into them. So yeah, beautiful, Mali. I love
Oh,
it.
thank you, Kim. Thank you.
And your next photograph is
Aye.
this one here. We're back to the coast.
We're back to calling a place as well, but I'm not going to. But if you go and watch the video, because there's a video to this as well, all my images, apart from a couple here tonight, are connected to a YouTube video. And this is Berwick. I'm going to butcher it. I can hear voices crying out now saying it's Spittle, but the lighthouse is in Berwick. No, you know, Kim. Come on, where's
I
this
don't know
place?
if I do actually. I don't know that part very well, to be honest.
Up Northumberland way, and it. I was having a tough time because I was with I wasn't having a tough time as in, oh, woe is me. I was with the kids and they were throwing sand everywhere, and I wanted to take some pictures, and I shouldn't have done really, but I've got the camera. Oh, it'd be rude not to. And we were walking along this beach, and there was bloody oil kind of packed. Oh, it was horrible. And I'm sorry, people who live there, but that beach was just like, what is going on? I don't know whether there'd been an oil spill. I have heard that there was an oil spill not long before, so it possibly could have washed up on the beach, which is really sad. And I'd gone back to the car sulking because there was nothing to take photos of. And I put the tripod up on the wall. There's like the embankment and then the wall, the sea wall. And I thought, wow, I'll just leave this going for like as long as I can, you know. And it started raining again, and it was quite a moody day. And I just thought, I like this. I'll put this in. And this again shows the optical quality of NiSi filters. This could have been like a 3-minute exposure with a 10 stop. Let's have a look before I get myself in trouble. Yeah, it was a 10 stop. Oh, and I used a grad. I did used to use grads, and this one was took on the D750. I do miss that camera. So my old DSLR, shot with a 70-200 f4, lovely lens, and yeah. There's not a lot to say, really. It's just a little bit of postcard from me, little bit of, simplicity again.
It also shows that there's a photographic opportunity in all weathers, in all moods,
Yeah.
in all locations. And the moment that you're about to pack up and you're sulking and you're off,
Yeah.
you can find something. It just sometimes just takes just stepping back a little bit and just taking a bit of a breather, and then something pops out to you. And the good thing about filters is if things don't look great weather-wise in the moment, you can create something creative with a filter by doing long exposures, and especially when you're at the coast or around a body of water. So
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
brilliant, brilliant.
Exactly. Yeah.
And your next image is this one
Oh,
here. Wow, the
yeah.
sand on everything. Actually, this image is just like, wow, so
There's
much
a lot going on. Yeah.
in a good way.
Yeah, the boat's gone now, so that's not going on.
Um,
This was on me knees to get just that reflection coming in. I don't really play around with my compositions for ages, like stalking or moving and stuff. But on this occasion, I spent quite a bit of time moving around and figuring out how and where I was going to put all the parts. And then these witches' tales, or whatever they call the rain dropping out the sky, started happening. And it was, wow, I've got to do something. It was really frantic moments of light and a sunset. I've not seen many like this. I really haven't seen anything quite like this. Now, there is quite a bit of work into this image in terms of editing. And I hope you can't see it, because that was the idea, was to just be subtle again. But this image is 4 years old, and I've added this in because although we progress and we get better and better at our photography, well, I like to think so. I like to think we're on this progression. I love the term Kaizen, where the idea of always reaching, always progressing, getting better, an infinite amount of ideas, narrowing it down eventually until you become zoned into a place of continuous improvement. And this image represents that to me, because there's so much wrong with it. It's such an amateur image, but at the same time, I have such a fondness, because I was with a good friend, Raymond McBride, and he took me to this place. This is Mel's Beach, or Meals Beach. We call it Mel's Beach. And it's a hard place to go and shoot because the tides are dangerous, and you've got to do it in the right time where you're still getting these contributes of water, but you're not going to drown. So it's an outgoing tide. And yeah, there's not a great deal more I can say about this image, other than I think I did use a grad. It's a landscape polarizer, and it's not a long exposure, I don't think. There was no NDs involved in this, and it was a very frantic 5 or 10 minutes. And I've got an image printed out on aluminium, same boat in front of me, completely different composition. But I love this one. I think you said it then, for the ripples in the sand at the beginning of the foreground of this image, taking you in. Because I used to really like shooting with a wide angle. I bet we all do it. We get going in photography and we need the widest lens, get it all in. And I was at that period in landscape photography. It's like, gotta get it all in, but I love vast skies. I've always loved vast. I just think the sky has so much story, has so much impact to an image. And if it's right, you get it right, and it's coming in from the corners. You'll see this a lot on my photography. I like things coming in off the corners with the sky, leading you to the subject or leading you through the frame. And this image represents that learning process 4 years ago for me.
Beautiful. I mean, these are the images that, like, this is how I got into photography, was going down to my local beach at low tide and photographing the skies and the reflections. And it's so challenging, especially with exposure and you know, when you've got that really bright horizon and then you've trying to compose it and dealing with the tides, and it's very, very tricky. But yeah, there's a lot going on in this image, but it works because there's so much going on in the sky, which really complements what's going on in the ripples and the sand. And then you've got this beautiful meandering line going through the scene. And yeah, it's just lovely. Really, really nice. So yeah, beautiful again, and completely different than anything that you've shown so far tonight, which is lovely to see. You've got one image left.
I have, yes.
Which is this stunning shot here. Beautiful. So
tonight has been a historic look back as well for me, because this was taken in 2018 at Derwent Water. And a lot of these images are key realizations in my photography. The moments of seeing, moments of opening my mind, moments of realizing what photography actually is, and how it either affects you emotionally, place, time, weather, or it's just something you see that you wouldn't normally see if you didn't have a camera. And all these images tonight represent the connection with yourself, the camera, the landscape, and seeing. And I'd been shooting a tree that's quite known at Otterfield, looking out to Otterfield Island at Derwent, and it's almost like a bonsai type tree that leans out. And I took these photographs of it. I'd done long exposure selfies with me sat there like that on a rock and all this business, and it just wasn't. I thought, no, and I wasn't feeling it. And I walked up at quite a steep embankment and got to an overlook of the Derwent Water, and people had left rubbish there. They'd obviously been sat there and they'd left crisp packets, cans, also. So I started packing all this rubbish up and putting it in my rucksack. And as I'm doing this, I looked up like that, as you do, just looked up and glanced. And I went, oh my God, there's a snake in the water. And I just saw this asp, this head of a snake jump coming out. And I was like, oh, what? And then, and without putting a filter on my eyes, I saw it instantly as a long exposure. I knew what I had to do. I knew what I needed to polarize it slightly. I knew what I had to do. Such a strange feeling. It was almost like I was possessed. It overtook me. The camera was on the tripod, boom, boom, filters in, everything on. And I didn't even look at the exposure time because I'll be honest, I don't. If Gary Goff's listening to this, because he's a very measured man, like yourself and like many other photographers. We count the time. I don't. Me, I stick a 10 stop on and I'll go for a walk and cut. Is it done? And I like to play like that with time. It's almost like a bit of a gamble. And I'd got everything set up and ready. And I call it the serpent. Did I call it the serpent of Derwent? Yeah, I think I did. And this particular image in I hate to say journey, but this, I don't think if I'd have got this image, I'd be quite where I am today. From one image, sounds strange, doesn't it? But this image really influenced what I needed to do. And I always have to go back and remind myself of the feeling I got when I saw this, the connection, the way it happened, the way I saw it, the way I put the filter system on, and then what came out when I got back and edited it. Not a great deal of editing to this at all. I have done it with different white balances. I've done it slight purple, I've done it dark, done it monochrome. I've tried different versions, but for some reason the matrix green, the simulation color of a world we live in, where I thought I quite like that color tone, and it stuck with me. And like I said, there's lots of different, I've done it in different colors. I think it's a different color in the video. So go back and watch that video and subscribe to my channel, ladies and gentlemen. And don't forget to get yourself a copy of Anne Stapper. Be very appreciated. And on that bombshell, it's over to you, Kim.
Brilliant. I've got to say, the green in that image is, I think there's just something about it. It really adds to it. And I love the story behind that image as well, because it's almost, it reminds me that when you're on location and you're having one of those days where you just can't find an image and you're not feeling it, it's just like, oh, this is just, you get frustrated. Yeah. If you find a way to switch your attention to something else, in your case, it was cleaning up the litter. Suddenly you're distracted by something else, and then you look up and you see something. Like a technique I try now is, if I'm struggling to find an image, I'll sit down and close my eyes for 30 seconds or a minute. And then when I reopen them, it's like you're seeing the world again. Yes. And sometimes you find an image that when you were so engrossed, you couldn't find anything, and suddenly there's something there. And it's a good kind of epiphany moment there for you as well. And, yeah, beautiful. Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening, Mali. The stories have just been beautiful, and some fantastic tips as well. And of course, if anybody's wanting to see more of you and have a look at your prints and your workshops, they can go to maliphotography.co.uk. So yeah, thank you so much, Mali. It's been an absolute pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you, Kim. Thanks so much, NiSi. And wow. Yeah, anyone who wants to hear me say anything is always, a privilege. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Mali. It's been amazing. You can see all past episodes of the Light Club over on the NiSi UK YouTube channel. And just to finish off, I am hosting my next NiSi Filters Day on the 29th of April in Berghead. So if you'd like to come along and be involved with this workshop, there's still some places left. So head over to nisioptics.co.uk, and in the NiSi Workshops tab, you'll be able to find out more information about this workshop. So brilliant. That's great. Thank you all again for joining, and we look forward to seeing you again next month. Have a good evening.